I was changing my clothes when I felt an uncanny sensation, as though someone was watching me. Women have this intuition and almost sixth sense that alerts them when they're being watched, especially with bad intentions. I was standing in my room hurriedly changing clothes because the lock on my bathroom door was broken. My husband had just called to inform me that his mother's health had worsened and I needed to rush to the hospital. Short on time, I decided to change in the room itself. While changing, I had a strange feeling that someone was trying to peek into the room, maybe through the door or even the windows. Dismissing it as paranoia, I continued, but then I heard the sound of footsteps running away. Frightened, I looked out of the window. There in the garden was my 12-year-old servant, Abbas, watering the plants. Relieved, I convinced myself it was nothing and went back to finish changing. After putting on my gown, I stepped out and gave Abbas some instructions. I might be late. If your employer, Majid, comes home, serve him dinner. If neither of us comes back early, lock the door properly from the inside and don't let anyone in without our permission. If any guests arrive, inform me immediately, I told him. Yes, ma'am, he replied. As I turned to leave, he called out, Ma'am, may I ask something? I stopped and turned to face him. What is it? My friend from the village is arriving tonight, he said hesitantly. Can he stay here just for one night? His request annoyed me. How could he expect me to let a stranger into my home? But after thinking it through, I figured that there wasn't much in the house worth stealing, and both Majid and I would be out. Reluctantly, I agreed. Fine, he can stay for one night, but make sure he doesn't cause any trouble. Abbas thanked me profusely. I handed him the house keys and reminded him, I'm leaving now. Make sure you lock the gate properly and don't leave the house unattended. If you have to leave, lock everything securely. Yes, ma'am, he replied, nodding. I drove off, watching through the rearview mirror as he closed the gate behind me. At the hospital, I ended up spending 24 hours with Majid. When we finally returned home, I was completely exhausted. I collapsed into bed while Majid got busy preparing for a case. When I woke up, Majid had already left for work. Later, Abbas and his friend, Tahir, approached me, asking for permission to leave for some errands. Still groggy and uninterested in doing anything myself, I waved them off. Go ahead. There's nothing urgent here, I said. With the house to myself, I locked the gate from the inside and went back to my room to nap. While I was sleeping, I suddenly felt like someone was walking in the lounge. Startled, I sat up, my heart racing. I'm the only one home, I thought. Who could it be? I cracked my bedroom door open and peeked outside. To my shock, Abbas and Tahir were sitting in the lounge. Confused and uneasy, I adjusted my scarf and stepped out. How did you get inside? I demanded. I locked the gate from the inside. Abbas exchanged a glance with Tahir before replying, We came to collect a file for Sir Majid. When you didn't answer, we climbed over the wall. I stared at them, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. Their explanation didn't sit right with me, but I chose not to show my unease. I'll discuss this with Majid tonight, I thought to myself. They took the file and left. I decided not to lock the gate again since it was daytime and I had a friend coming over later. Returning to the kitchen, I contemplated cooking, but eventually decided to order food so I could spend more time with my friend. When the delivery arrived, I asked Abbas to pay the delivery boy and give him a tip. Afterward, Abbas and Tahir left again. My friend arrived shortly after, and we spent hours chatting, reminiscing about our school and college days, laughing and sharing stories. I had a friend visiting that day, so I decided not to lock the gate after the delivery and instead returned inside to prepare for her arrival. As I began cooking, I thought it might be better to order food instead, allowing me to spend more time with her. By the time my friend arrived, Abbas and his friend Tahir had also returned. I asked Abbas to receive the food from the delivery boy, pay him, and include a tip. Once they left to get the food, my friend came in and we spent hours talking. We reminisced about our childhood, youth, school, and college days. It turned out to be a lovely day, filled with laughter and shared memories. That evening, her husband came to pick her up, and she left. However, her parting words disturbed me. She said, I don't feel good about your servant. Keep an eye on him. I laughed it off, saying, he's just a 12-year-old boy. What harm could he possibly do? But she insisted, still, you should watch him closely. Her words lingered in my mind as I prepared for bed. Majid was away in another city, attending an event. So I was alone in the house. The more I thought about what she said, the more uneasy I became. Should I secretly observe them? I wondered. Or should I just confront them directly? But I had no evidence, and they hadn't done anything significant to warrant questioning. Thinking about it, I eventually drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of someone persistently ringing the gate bell. It was so loud and continuous that it felt like the person ringing it had forgotten to let go of the button. Annoyed by the interruption to my sleep, I reluctantly got out of bed and checked the rooms before heading to the gate. To my surprise, it was my husband standing there, looking irritated. "Where's the servant? Why didn't he open the gate?" he asked. I rubbed my eyes and replied, "I was asleep. The servant must be home." "He's not," my husband said sharply. "If he was, wouldn't he have opened the gate? I've been standing here since morning." I was stunned. Where could Abbas and his friend have gone? I brushed aside my concern for the moment, opened the gate for my husband, and locked it again after he entered. I prepared breakfast for him, and after serving him, began cleaning the house, which had been neglected for a day and had become quite messy. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but feel angry at Abbas. My husband, exhausted from his travels, went to sleep after eating. I decided to let the matter rest for now, but strange incidents started occurring frequently after this, forcing me to doubt Abbas. I didn't discuss it with my husband, as he had been the one to hire Abbas. He trusted him completely, often saying, "He's just a child, there's nothing to worry about." When Abbas finally returned, I confronted him. "Where were you? Why didn't you open the gate this morning?" Looking nervous, he replied, "I wasn't feeling well, so I had to take my friend to the hospital." His excuse felt like an outright lie. The lock on the gate had been secured from the inside. How had they left? Did they jump the wall again? I resolved to catch him red-handed the next time. Abbas was hired by my husband because he used to serve tea at my husband's office. His uncle owned a tea shop near the courthouse, where he served tea to all the lawyers. Over time, people began to trust him, and my husband was among them. When I told my husband I needed a servant to handle household chores, someone young but reliable, Abbas was brought in. It was my husband who brought Abbas into our home, hiring him as a domestic helper. At the time, he seemed like a decent boy. When my husband asked if we should keep him, I agreed, reasoning that he was still young and we could dismiss him when he grew older. My husband said, "If you ever feel uneasy or can't trust him, we'll let him go. For now, he seems fine." One afternoon, I went to the kitchen for a glass of water when I heard strange noises coming from Abbas's room. The sounds raised goosebumps on my skin. It seemed like he was watching some inappropriate videos on his phone, as the explicit sounds were audible even outside the room. Shocked that a 12-year-old boy could be watching such content, I approached his room, where the door was slightly ajar. Peeking through the gap, I saw Abbas and his friend Tahir, who was supposed to stay for just one night but had now become a permanent resident, watching those videos together and behaving inappropriately. Horrified, I didn't confront them, but instead ran back to my room, my mind racing with thoughts. I had previously kept some strange incidents to myself, but this was too much. I called my husband immediately. "Come home for lunch today," I said. "I'll cook at home, so don't eat outside." He was surprised, but agreed without questioning further. "All right, I'll come," he said. After ending the call, I became deeply anxious about how to bring up the matter. What if my husband reacted badly? He trusted Abbas completely and dismissed my concerns before, saying I was overthinking. For instance, when I mentioned that Abbas and Tahir would climb over the wall to enter the house despite the gate being locked, he had brushed it off as me being overly suspicious. But this time, the situation was too serious to ignore. I had no concrete proof, yet I felt insecure and uneasy in my own home. I decided I needed to discuss everything with my husband, regardless of the potential argument. I prepared lunch and set the table while Abbas and Tahir remained asleep in their room. I chose not to wake them and did all the work myself. When my husband arrived, I asked him to freshen up while I got ready. We ate together, and I silently thanked God that Abbas and Tahir were still asleep, giving us some privacy. After lunch, I decided to broach the topic. I began cautiously, trying to ease into the conversation, but my husband's phone rang. He moved away to take the call, and I anxiously waited for him to return. When he came back, he looked hurried. "I have to leave," he said abruptly. "We'll talk tonight. There's an emergency at the hospital." My heart sank. "Is it your mother?" I asked, worried. "No. One of my clients was in an accident, and I need to be there," he explained. I nodded, holding back my concerns. He left, and I returned to my room, overwhelmed with thoughts. Later, Abbas and Tahir woke up. I told them lunch was ready and went to the kitchen. As I prepared to pray, I overheard them talking on the phone. Their conversation left me frozen in shock. "Yes, everything is going according to plan," one of them said. "Majid trusts us completely, but his wife is becoming suspicious. We'll handle her soon. Don't worry. We'll drug her, make her unconscious, and do everything we've planned. Once we have the videos, we'll use them to blackmail Majid. He won't risk his wife's reputation being destroyed online. He'll drop the case no matter what." My blood ran cold as I realized their sinister intentions. They were planning to exploit me to destroy my husband's case. I couldn't believe this was happening under my own roof. "But we'll have to delay the plan for a few days," one of them said. "Majid's wife is getting suspicious, and she might tell him about it soon, ruining everything. We'll wait until she starts trusting us again. Majid trusts us completely, but we need to ensure she does too." They continued. "We could forcefully record the video now since Majid is out all day, but that might backfire if a case is filed against us. We need the video to make it look like she willingly participated. That way, when we show it to Majid, he'll be compelled to drop the case. No one wants their wife's reputation destroyed, especially with such a scandalous video going online." I froze in horror. My hands trembled as I silently backed away and locked myself in my room. Tears streamed down my face, but I quickly realized crying wouldn't solve anything. Without evidence, my husband wouldn't believe me, especially with the trust he placed in Abbas. I decided I needed to gather proof. If these two were planning something so heinous, I needed to ensure they were caught red-handed, with Majid witnessing everything. Only then could we expose their true intentions without my husband's reputation or his ongoing case being damaged. Composing myself, I sent Majid a voice note. "Come home at exactly 1:30 p.m. today, no matter what. If you don't, I'll leave for my parents' house permanently." Shocked by the urgency in my voice, he replied, "Is everything okay?" "Yes," I said, "but you must come home at 1:30 p.m. No earlier, no later." Confused but concerned, he agreed. "All right, I'll finish my work and be there by 1:30, he said. I then went downstairs to Abbas and Tahir, acting as though I completely trusted them. "I trust you two more than myself," I said. "My niece is arriving from another city. Please pick her up from the bus stand later. But before that, could you make me a cup of tea? I have a terrible headache." Hearing my words, they seemed to relax. Believing I trusted them, they quickly began preparing tea. I noticed them adding something to it, likely the drug they planned to use, but I pretended not to see anything. I acted as though my headache was unbearable, and even allowed one of them to massage my head while the other handed me the tea. Taking the tea to my room, I poured it down the sink and lay on my bed, leaving the door slightly ajar. I knew they had been watching me for a while and suspected they would check on me to ensure I was unconscious. Sure enough, the two entered the room shortly after. One of them came close to check if I was breathing normally, while the other whispered, "Is she out?" I remained still, pretending to be unconscious. Seeing no reaction, one of them locked the door and windows and turned on the light. The other took out his phone and stood about 10 steps away, preparing to record a video. My heart raced. Sweat dripped from my forehead and my hands trembled, but I maintained my composure. At exactly 1:30 p.m., I heard the sound of the front door. Majid must have arrived. He tried to open the bedroom door, but found it locked. Quietly, he fetched the spare keys from the kitchen and unlocked the door. What he saw enraged him. One of the boys was preparing to assault me while the other was recording the scene. I was lying there with no dupatta over my head or blanket to cover me. Majid instantly understood what was happening. Without a moment's hesitation, he stormed into the room and slapped both boys repeatedly, grabbing the phone from the one recording. "You've picked the wrong house to mess with," he shouted as he called the police. He tied them both to chairs and waited for the authorities to arrive. Meanwhile, he gently splashed water on my face, pretending to wake me up. When I opened my eyes, I saw Majid standing tall, his fury evident. Though they were just boys, Majid's physical strength and the weight of their guilt rendered them helpless. Bound to the chairs, they began crying, their innocent faces betraying the monstrous deeds they had planned. "Please let us go," one pleaded. "This wasn't our idea. We were forced into this." Majid didn't flinch. "You'll explain that to the police," he said coldly. "You'll learn what happens when you try to destroy someone's family." Sobbing, they continued, "It wasn't us. A man kidnapped our sisters and forced us to do this. He threatened to kill them unless we recorded a compromising video of your wife to blackmail you. We had no choice. They wanted to use the video to blackmail you into losing the case," one of them sobbed. "If the video is shown, the decision will go in their favor. We did all of this to save our sister's honor. No brother can bear the thought of their sister being humiliated publicly. We are poor, helpless, and have nothing but our dignity. If our sisters lose their honor, we will have nothing left. Please, sir, let us go. Take action against those people instead. Save your wife and our sisters from their evil clutches. We have evidence against them, but we cannot take legal action. If we do, they will sell our sisters into slavery. To protect them, we had no choice but to do this terrible thing. Please forgive us." The boys wept uncontrollably as they spoke. Their words struck a chord with me. For years, my husband and I had been struggling to have children, and seeing these boys, so young yet burdened with responsibilities, softened my heart. "Please forgive them," I pleaded with my husband, but he shook his head firmly. "People like this have no right to live in society. They shouldn't push their problems onto others by ruining innocent lives." I knew my husband was a kind-hearted man. Despite his words, I was sure he would eventually help them. He had already called the police. But when the officers arrived, my husband devised a plan to protect the boys. He told the police, "Someone attempted to harm my wife while she was sleeping and tried to blackmail me. Go arrest Chaudhry Aslam immediately." The officers hesitated. "Sir, he's a powerful man with influential connections. Even if we arrest him, he'll be out in no time. Filing a case against him would be a waste of time and money." "My evidence is strong enough to keep him behind bars," my husband replied confidently. "I'll ensure he faces justice. Let's see if truth prevails or evil triumphs." The police agreed and left for the station. Once they were gone, I brought the boys out of hiding and asked them to explain everything. They revealed that they were orphans forced to work in Chaudhry Aslam's household, where he had coerced them into the scheme. They were tasked with blackmailing my husband into either losing or withdrawing from the case. The boys lived with their younger siblings in a row of makeshift huts at the edge of our society. The weight of their responsibilities at such a young age had driven them to this dark path. Despite their actions, they were still just children. I couldn't stop thinking, what if someday our own children faced similar challenges and strayed onto the wrong path? Wouldn't we try to guide them back? This thought convinced me that these boys deserved a second chance. "I will help you," I told them. "You brought evil into this house, but you'll leave as better people. I'll make sure you get an education so you can provide for your siblings without resorting to crime." 2 months later, my husband won the case. Chaudhry Aslam was sentenced to life imprisonment, and his influence couldn't save him. The boys began studying diligently while also working to support their siblings. They became part of our household, bringing life and laughter to our previously quiet home. And then, Allah rewarded us in the most beautiful way. After years of waiting, I found out I was expecting. My barren life was now filled with blessings, and the joy of children filled our home once more.